Hey guys, welcome back to Paul's Flight Tech for part 2 in our Simple VHF Radio build series. Now I've received all the parts I need to build a functional VHF radio, and before I go through the trouble of making an enclosure and figuring out how everything's going to fit and look pretty, I want to make sure the parts I received are in good working order. Sometimes when you order things from overseas, the quality control isn't up to par, but most of the time I have had no issues. We also want to make sure that everything we configure in SimVim is working properly as well. Now, there's a lot of information to cover, but my goal here is to give you plenty of information to be educated and understand the process, why we're doing what we're doing, and how it works, but not go into so much detail that I bore you to tears and you lose complete interest in this project. All of my components and any references you may need will be provided in links in my description, so please check that out for more information if you're feeling a little lost. Starting from left to right here, we have our male-to-male and male-to-female jumper wires. I don't know how many I have quite a number of them, and they're in varying lengths and colors. We have our breadboard, we have our Arduino 2560. These are two 7-segment displays, and they are MAX7219 modules with 0.36 inches height on these segments for the digits. I've already gone ahead and soldered the breakout pin to the boards, and I'll show you how to do that later on in the video. Here we have our 74HC 4067 16-bit analog multiplexer board. So the actual multiplexer chip itself, the HC4067, is this little black guy on the board. The breakout board is actually just an easy way to configure the pins and use this in a working piece of hardware. Now, the breakout pins did not come with this board. I bought a bag off of eBay for less than probably $8 with a ton. This is probably going to cover me for a while there. And they simply break apart to length for how many you need. Then we have our 360-degree rotary encoder with a cap and a tactile push button. Over here we have my dedicated 5-volt 2-amp power supply. Now, when you have these MAX modules, you do not want to use these with a 5-volt output from the Arduino. As a matter of fact, I don't think I plan on using anything to run power from the Arduino. It's all going to be off dedicated power. What this is an old cell phone charger I've cannibalized, and I took two male ends for jumper wires and I soldered them together, put a little heat shrink on them, and bam, I've got my power supply to use for my power and ground bus on the breadboard. Then I've got my trusty digital meter here. This is extremely helpful, especially when I'm trying to figure out what resistance and the ohms are on each resistor. Speaking of, we're probably going to need about 10 220 ohm resistors. I've got a green LED basically just to show me the status if I've got power from my supply or not. And I've got two 1000 ohm resistors. These are going to be configured as pull down resistors in our circuit for the 7-segment displays. I've got a pair of snips, and you're definitely going to need your soldering iron and some solder. I go a little bit more into detail on that later on in the soldering section. And then I have my helping hands, which are extremely helpful. This is basically a little gadget that will hold your components as you need to solder them, so you can use your hands freely for solder in the iron. Pretty helpful, especially the magnification. All right, now that we covered that, let's move on to the next part. So one of the first things we want to do is get our breakout pins soldered to the breakout board for our multiplexer. Now, pins come in many different sizes, and all you need to do is decide how many you need and then use some snips, or either break with your fingers very carefully a segment of pins you'll need to solder. And you always want to put the short side of the breakout pins into the board. Okay, so I'm zoomed in here to my breakout board, and I've got that held pretty well here with my helping hands. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this around a little bit because I will be soldering from the back. And we're going to insert the short side of our pins. And just kind of prop them on top of the other one. So it's kind of hard to tell, I know, but the pins are sticking up where I can solder them now. And I'll probably start at this side over here to the right because it's got the most support. And the soldering iron I'm using is just a really inexpensive one from Amazon, and you can look at the name and look this one up. It's a 60-watt model, and typically I keep my solder just above 300 degrees Celsius. And the solder I'll be using is this, and this is from Amazon, I believe. Okay, so our soldering iron is good and hot, and one of the things I want to show you here is I use some medium steel wool in a jar as my cleaner here. I'm just going to put it to the side. And I've already tinned the soldering iron when it was about 150 or so degrees, or maybe closer to 200 degrees. But it's been tinned, and now we're going to start soldering our pins. And actually, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. And we'll go down some. If we can't really get too good on the focus here, but I'll do my best. And we're going to go ahead and heat this up. Put a little solder on there. Come here, guy. And that's basically what we're looking for. Nice solder on each one of these. And we don't want them to cross over. So I'll continue to work on these, and when I'm done, we'll jump to the next part. Okay, so I'm definitely not the best in the world at soldering, but our pins are soldered on. And this one kind of broke here, which is okay. I just pulled it a little too hard and snapped it. But as long as we've got a through solder on the other side, we are good to go. But there we go. There's our breakout board, all soldered up and ready to go. All right, so next we want to take our MAX7219 chips, and we want to solder the left pins on. I'm going to actually put the right pins on too, but you only need the left ones. So we're going to put this guy in our helping hands and turn it sideways like so. And I'm going to actually use the full alligator clip to clamp down on the whole thing and hold it where I can solder it. Alright, and so now I have my pin soldered on. And again, you can make fun of my hack job of a solder there, but they'll hold, they'll be conductive, and that's all that matters. Before we start making our circuit on our breadboard, I want to talk about resistors real quick because they're pretty important when it comes to putting your circuits together. And we don't want to use the wrong ones, and we want to know how to identify which ones we are using, because sometimes you'll have 5 or 10 different ones, and or even if it's one, you want to know which one you have in case it was in the wrong spot in your tray, which I have a divider tray. So if I pick up this guy and I am going to zoom in, well, not zoom in, but focus it there, you can see that there are different colors. It looks like black in the middle, brown on the left, red kind of to the right, and another. Basically what I'm trying to get the point here is I can't really tell the colors sometimes. I have a hard time telling the colors to identify these things. So they do have references what the color bands mean, and here is just a Google image I pulled up on resistor color identification. And I'm not even going to try to get into it, but it tells you how to identify what the bands you have, and if you have a multiplier, which is right here, and it shows you how to read it. But there's a much easier way than this, and I will just show you what I do. So what I do is I typically turn this to about 2000 to start on my digital meter, and I can take it doesn't matter which end, but I can touch the 2 legs, and I know this is a 220. That's a 220 ohm resistor. So this one looks to be a 1000. This is a 1000 ohm resistor, which is good because now I know which ones are which, and I can even do this one too. Same thing. Let it get steady here for a second. About 1,000. So I know what resistors I have and already have them separated, but that's how I use a multimeter to tell what I'm working with. Okay guys, this is where things get kind of technical, and I'm going to spare you from going through it all in the video, but I will encourage you to definitely check out the #1 resource for everything I'm doing, which is going to be simvim.com. Now here, we're going to click on Input Output Guide, and there's a bunch of different guides here for all the things and functions you can do with SimVim with your actual simulator. But we're going to go to General Wiring, and it's here in the very first picture that you want to make a note of this schematic with these pins and these wires, because this is going to be how we send our outputs from our simulator to a multiplexer, and that's going to feed our 7-segment displays, our 7219 chips. And if you look here on the second picture down, you can see that we want to use resistors in place for this. And now these are going to be, it says you can use 120 to 300 ohm. We're going to use 220 because that's what I have. I don't have any 120s and I don't have any 300s. So we're well within the range of what they recommend. But this is important. This is why we need all those resistors I talked about earlier, those 220s. And if you go down here, we're going to be focusing on outputs. And if you read over here on the left, outputs, optional, used for 7-segment displays. Basically, that means that every one of these pins can drive a 7-segment display. Pretty nifty. And again, if you remember looking at the first schematic up top, here's your SIG, S3, S2, S1, S0, controller pin, etc. that we're going to need to go from the Arduino to here. So you have to use this one and this first one for the map. Now, there's a little bit more information going back to the input-output guide. If you go down to 7-segment displays, there's a lot of information on 7-segment displays. And here is the other half of the schematic, showing you where we need our 1,000 ohm resistor going from the clock pin on our MAX7219. We're going to run DNL buses here. We're going to have a power supply bus here from our dedicated power supply. And of course, you just pick a pin and you use the configurator in SimVim to configure what pin drives which 7-segment display. And again, here's your S0, 1, 2, 3. And of course, the other half of the schematic shows where those actually go to your Arduino. Anyways, hope this is helpful. Just wanted to go over where I'm getting my information in case you want to come read. And I really encourage you to spend some time reading through this information. Okay, so it's time to get started and putting together our circuit for our prototype here. And before we get started, I actually want to mention the multiplexer is going to be a little bit of a creative setup because I don't have enough male to female jumper wires to connect the pins here. So what we'll be doing is actually flipping this and inserting it into the board. And I've got a very helpful diagram I drew up to show us the bottom of the board, so we'll actually know where things need to go. But we'll get to that here shortly. Let's start off by wiring up our first 7-segment display. So we want to take one of our MAX modules here, and I'm going to go ahead, and this isn't going to be in any specific correct color code, it's just what I have available. We're going to go ahead and connect VCC to a red, and we're going to plug that into a power bus way down here. We're trying to keep our wires kind of neat here. I want to move this down a little bit. Then we want to do our ground, and I'm going to use green for this ground. So we're going to go into the second pin from the top, GND, which is our ground, and we're going to plug that into the ground bus. If we can, if this thing will plug in. Let's try a different one. There we go. Okay, so we've got that done. Now we're going to go to our D, or our DIN. D is what they mark this as in the diagrams for SimVim, but this is the DIN. And we're going to plug that. Actually kind of wrap around here to make this a little bit neater. We're going to plug this into a bus. So I'm going to use the very top first row for this one. Put that up there a little bit to make it a little neater. Then we're going to have our CS, or what is noted as the L line, for SimVim, plug that into the CS slot, and then we're going to go to the bottom. This is going to get a little ugly here, I think, because of how the lines are going to overlap. So lastly, we have clock, and clock is going to need a pull down resistor, a 1000 ohm pull down resistor, which is one of these big guys here. I cut these down so I know my 220s from my 1000s and to not take up so much room. So we're going to take this 1000 ohm, and what I'm going to do is actually go down here a little ways, and I'm going to plug it into 60 on my board just to kind of give you a reference there, and I'm going to plug it into the ground bus on the bottom. And we're going to need this ground bus to work, so what I want to go ahead and do is take a green jumper, and at the very end I'm going to plug this ground bus into this ground bus. That way our ground is actually working properly now. We have it all connected. Alright, so we're going to take our other 1000 ohm resistor, because we're going to have to do our next segment next. I'm going to skip one and plug that in. Looks like it'll be about 58, and make sure these are not touching. And there we go. And now we're ready for the next one here. And let's go ahead and start this guy. So I'm going to start from the top, and we're going to use brown for VCC. And just like above, we're going to go way up here to the top, try to loop this around, and we're just going to go into the power bus line on the top row here. Then we're going to need to do our ground, and I'm going to use orange for that. Same thing up top. I'm going to plug this into the ground bus line. Alright, got that done. Next, we're going to plug in the D, or our DIN. Somebody's going to make a comment about that, I'm sure. And just like up top, our DIN is going to be blue. We are going to match that with the blue on this same bus, because we're going to go from here to our Arduino. So they'll operate on that same line. And then we're going to do purple for CS or L, and that's going to go on the bus line down here at the bottom of the first row. And just like up here for the DIN, we're going to go from here to our Arduino to make that an active bus on that segment. We're going to connect our two clocks on each segment to the pull down resistors. So for this first one, we're going to plug it into row 60 on my breakout board, and it's on the same as this leg for this resistor. And we're going to use gray for the lower one, and we're going to connect that with the leg on this resistor on row 58 right there. So now we have them connected. This isn't really sitting too pretty, but we'll get that adjusted here shortly. Now I want to go ahead and actually insert the multiplexer, and I'm going to pop up this chart here I made. So just like on the chart up top, we have the fewer pins up top and the most pins on the bottom. I'm just going to pick a spot here on my board with enough real estate to work with and just pop that in. There we go. So now I'm going to take these resistors, and if I have trouble with this, I'm going to edit the video so it doesn't take so much time. But I'm basically just going to take these 220 ohm resistors, and I'm going to start inserting them in the board, straddling across the gap here, skipping a segment each time. And I'm probably going to fast forward this so you don't have to watch me plug in every single one of these resistors, but you get the idea. They're all going to go like this. Okay, so there we have it. We have all of our 220 ohm resistors here. There's 8 of them, and again, I just spaced them out one after the other. So now what we're going to want to do is connect the correct pins here to these resistors. What we're going to do starting from the beginning is I'm going to plug into the top right, which is our signal, and I'm going to go across and down to be on the same line of the first resistor. And I'm going to continue to do that for signal 3 all the way down to the EN, which is this one. This is power and ground here. Well, ground and power here. We don't want to use those, but I'm going to just keep on connecting these to be in line with resistors. No specific color codes here. Pretty simple little process. And these are going by pretty quick, and here's our almost down to the last one here. All right, and our last two remaining are going to be for our D and L lines, which we'll connect here in a second from the buses. So we don't need anything too long, I don't think. We'll get some medium length wires here. Here's one. Sorry, these things are sticking to my mat. And let's get another medium one. Here's two. We'll go with white, actually. So the top, if we look at our colors here, we've got D at the top. So I'm going to plug into this top first row bus, and I'm going to connect that way down here at the bottom to this resistor line, and then I'm going to do the same thing for L on the bottom. Plug it in the bottom down there, this first row, and I'm going to tap it in to, come on guy, there we go, into the L line. So we'll just have to make a note of that when we look at these. This is going to be, let me get a screwdriver here. This is going to be signal, then S3, S2, S1, S0, EN, and then we've got D and L. And I'll just have to make a note of that, and you'll see that in the diagram as well. So now we want to plug in our power and our ground for the actual multiplexer. So power is going to be the first one. I'm just going to use this yellow here for power. It's going to plug in there, and we're going to plug that into the power bus on the top. Then we've got our ground, and I'm going to plug that into the ground bus at the top. All right, we're getting somewhere. Everything's pretty much wired up the way it should be according to our diagram. Now the only thing we need to do is go from our breadboard to the Arduino. So I'm going to spin the Arduino around. This is probably really hard to see. It's really dark, so I'm just going to have to verbally tell you where I'm plugging what in. Okay, now we have, just to recap, we have all of our wires connected from our display pins onto the breadboard where they need to go. We have our D's and L's bust out where they need to go. We have power and ground bust out here. We have our ground carried over to the bottom bus down here to make our 1000 ohm resistors work with our clock pins. We have our 8 resistors here, and these are all connected where they should go in correlation with, I think it's up there if you can see the diagram I put up there. So now we need to go from the resistor pins here on the other side to the breakout board. So the first one we're going to do, we're going to actually up top, right here, we're going to work from signal S3, S2, S1, S0, EN, VCC ground at the top, right to left. So first we're going to start with our signal, and signal looks like it goes to line 26 on the Arduino. So just to show you, there's everything's labeled on the Arduino. These are inside pins, then there's everything labeled for the outside pins. So we're going to start off with pin 26, and this is going to go to our signal pin. And signal, if you look up there at our diagram, it's on the top right, and it goes to the first one. So we know that this is basically laid out just like the top right of our diagrams. Signal 3 is connected to 25. So we're going to pop this into 25. And this is signal 3. Next, we've got signal 2. Signal 2 is going to go to 24. So So we're going to go one above 25, which is 24. And we're going to plug that into signal 2. Next, we've got signal 1, and that is going to be 23. So we're going to plug this into 23. Well, we're going to try to. And this is going to go into signal 1, that resistor. And next, we have signal 0. I'm going to go ahead and plug it in here first, actually. And then signal 0 is going to be 22 on the Arduino. Oh, if I could see. There we go. Sweet. Got that in. All right. And the last one we have is EN. And EN is actually going to be assigned to a control pin on the Arduino. I'm going to leave this red so I know what it is. But we're just going to plug that in, and we're just going to let it ride for right now. We're not even going to do anything with it. And then lastly, we have D and L. And we're going to do D first. It's top, and it looks like it's going to be line 28. So get our board here. I'm going to plug into line 28. Here we go. And D was the top, just making sure I'm going, yep, it's this one right here. And L will be the top here. And L looks like it is going to 27. All right, cool. Yep, all of our pins look correct. And we don't use T because we're not using an input. This is for output. So we do not need to worry about the T pin right now. So all this is pretty well connected. This is everything we need. We need to connect our power. Remember, I have this dedicated power supply I made. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a ground and a power bus from the lines here, and that will take care of providing dedicated power to our breadboard when we do this test. Oh, one more thing. This is actually really important, and I just realized I didn't do it. There's a ground on the bottom left here of the Arduino. When you have the pin, when you have it vertical like this, you want to make sure to complete the circuit by grounding that. Yeah, that'll cause problems. All right, we've got some power going to here now. And we're going to plug our power and our USB. You should hear it connect here. There we go. And there our displays are lit. It might be a little washed out because of the lighting, but they are extremely bright where I'm sitting. So now it's time to jump into SimVim Configurator and actually configure all of this to work right. Okay, so jumping over to simvim.com, we're going to click on the configurator. We need to generate a file so we can make everything work. So full table, 2 engines in our aircraft, master board, and we're going to choose extended and serial. Now we're going to be working with communication radios, so we're going to do COM nav, and then we're going to click the tab for COM nav displays. Before we can select our active and standby 6-digit displays, we need to select a pin to use. I'm just going to choose 13. And we want to choose output multiplexer. That's what MUX stands for, multiplexer. All right, we've selected our output pin. Now, under 6-digit COM1 active, we're going to select 7-segment displays. And we're going to choose pin 13. Here we have a list of all 16 outputs. For our multiplexer, we're going to select 0. It's a MAX7219 driver. And we don't want to put anything in the position to offset. We are going to do that for our standby segment, but we're not going to do it for our active because this will make the left 2 digits blank. All right, and we're going to choose brightness control bus 1. Done. All right, now we're going to choose COM1 standby. It is a 7-segment display. Pin 13, multiplexer pin 1. It is a MAX7219. And we want a 2-digit offset. This means that the last 2 digits of the segment will be blank. And no additional text. We're going to put 1 for our brightness control bus. Done. So we have 2 pins configured for our multiplexer, and we have room for 14 more. But for right now, we're going to go with this. We're going to save. Of course, we're going to keep this, show our data config file in the folder. Oh, it popped up on another screen. Bring us over here. And we're going to cut. I'm going to my X-Plane 11 folder. We're going to go to Resources. Then we're going to go to Plugins. Then SimVim. And I'm going to paste it here and overwrite the existing one. There we go. All right, now let's jump on into X-Plane and see if this bad boy will work. Okay, we are in X-Plane 11. Let's do new flight. And we're going to use the 737-800X, the ZIBO. We're going to start with engines running. I'm at the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta Airport. It doesn't matter about your weather and time of day. Just start the flight. And we're going to jump ahead so you don't have to watch this load. All right, we're loaded up. I'm going to go ahead and close these windows. And as you can tell here, we're still waiting for the little spinny thing. And when that's done, we will actually be able to test. There we go. We're going to close this. All right, let's jump on down to our radios. And I'm going to zoom in and jog over a little bit so we can pop up the camera. And we can see the 7-segment displays. And I've got the lights turned off in the room to make it look better on camera. And one thing is, you can already tell on the active, we have the first 2 digits are blacked out. And on the standby, the right 2 digits are blacked out, because when these displays are in the box, those are going to be covered by bezels. All right, so moment of truth. Will it work? Up there is our kilohertz for standby and megahertz, all working. And let's switch them out. All right, nice. We can do whatever we want with these now. That's awesome. So we've got our working prototype. So that's it for today. Thank you again for tuning in to Paul's Flight Deck. Check out my website, paulsflightdeck.com. Please like and subscribe, and I look forward to our next video.